Hello, and welcome to the program. This is The Black Ponderer. I'm your host, Neil Trotter. And today, in this video, what we're going to be talking about is a discussion on love. That's right. We're going to be asking questions like, what is love? How do we express love? Do we have any preconceived notions of what love is? How do we define love? How do we express love? These are the questions that we would like to talk about here on this video, and we're going to do that via a discussion of this book right here. Interesting, it's called The Ethical Slut. That's what it's called. And it is, honestly, to be upfront about it, it's one of the best books I have ever read. To be frank, you got that title there, Ethical Slut. Brings you right in. But it is a self-help book. And, sometimes the self-help book genre gets knocked or, sidelined. But, some of the best books I've ever read were self-help books. Of course, there's many garbage self-help books out there. But, that's just because there's a lot of self-help books out there. Not all of them are going to be good. Some of them are going to be garbage. Some of them are going to be great. Some of them are going to be mediocre. It's just the common histogram, the whole bell curve thing. But anyway, what this book is about, it is a guide to non-monogamy, or also, another way of saying that, polyamory, or polyamory is a kind of non-monogamy where you're having romantic, really in-depth, deep relationships with more than just one person. Contrary to the typical traditional marriage. Now that's very, a very taboo thing to discuss. Very radical, out there kind of way of living. If you're in a polyamorous or non-monogamous relationship. But people have been doing that for quite a long time throughout history. It's just we live in this society where that is something that is not part of the mainstream culture. We focus more on our traditional Puritan patriarchal kinds of marriages, and we don't leave much room for any other kind of relationship that's also deep in the realm of love and romantic relationships and what have you. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why that is. Why do we have such a restricted, limited understanding of love and relationships? And maybe we can open the box and explore alternate definitions that are just equally as valid forms of expression of love. And while doing that, we can critique our mainstream perception of love and relationships, and maybe find some problems with our mainstream ideas of what love is. And maybe by exploring the idea of non-monogamous relationships or polyamorous relationships, we can get a better understanding of what really is love. The thing is, though, so this book is about a lot of things. It's a lot of things, right? And we're not going to go over everything this book talks about, because these videos, the Black Ponder videos, they're never like book summaries. We don't go over every single thing in the books I cover. I just focus on themes, right? So it's not, although this is a self-help book about being in a successful non-monogamous relationship, we're not so much going to explore, the ins and outs of polyamory and whatnot, which is what this book does. But it does a lot of other stuff too. One of the things that it does is it explores, what love is and how we perceive love today, and the problems of our perception of love, and maybe what we think love is not really love. And I'm more focusing on that, right? I find that interesting because this is a philosophy channel, and we're going to talk more about the philosophy that's brought up in this book as it explores romantic love relationships outside the mainstream perception of the typical marriage, right? So I'll begin with a quote because that's what we do here on the Black Ponder. We actually read the text, right? And then after we read some quotes from the text, we give some supplementary commentary. Well, I do. And then often that's followed up with comments down below, and we kind of have a discourse there. So I'm going to read you this quote that's here on page 28 because some people, they actually read along. I used to not give pages because I didn't assume people would read along, but people are like, hey, could you give the page number? I would like to read along. So if you have this, this is the third edition, and it's on page 28. And this section is called Abundance is Entirely Available. Okay, so let me read you this. Many people believe, explicitly or implicitly, that our capacities for love, intimacy, and connection are finite. That there is never enough to go around, and that if you give some to one person, you must be taking some away from another. We call this belief a starvation economy. Many of us learned to think this way in childhood from parents who had insufficient affection or attention for us. So we learn that there is only a limited amount of love in the world, and we have to fight for whatever we get, sometimes in cutthroat competition with our siblings. People who operate from starvation economies can become very possessive about the people, things, and ideas that matter to them. They see the whole world in that limited light, so that anything they get comes from a small pool of not enough, and must thus be taken from someone else. And similarly, anything anyone else gets must be subtracted from them. It is important to distinguish between starvation economies and real-world limits. Okay? Time, for example, is a real-world limit. Even the most dedicated slut, and in this book it uses that term in a positive, is trying to reclaim the word and use the word as a noun that describes somebody who's free loving, who doesn't have this starvation economy perspective on love. Even the most dedicated slut has only 24 hours every day. Love is not a real world limit, okay? The mother of 9 children can love each of them as much as the mother of an only child loves her one. Our belief is that the human capacity for sex and love and intimacy is far greater than most people think, possibly infinite, and that having a lot of satisfying connections simply makes it possible for you to have a lot more. Imagine what it would feel like to live in an abundance of sex and love, to feel that you had all of both that you could possibly want, free of any feelings of deprivation or neediness. Imagine how strong you would feel if you got to exercise your love muscles. That much, and how much love you would have to give. Okay, so that's quite interesting, right? And I think it's a really good examination of how we see love today and how we kind of live in this world today. And it kind of reminds me of a lot of people when they critique, how we're in this world of what's currently called, late stage capitalism, right? Where, we live in this capitalist society and it's gone like really too far into the capitalist direction where we're just seeing everything as commodities and like limited resources, and it's this kind of marketplace, right? Where, you can only get so much and you have to buy from somebody and somebody has to sell you something, and there's only a limited amount of things you could get until it's all gone. And there's many parts of life that are not like that. But the problem is we live in this society where everything is framed in that way. It kind of harkens to that critique where we're in this hyper-capitalist or commodity culture, right? And love is one of those things where we fall into that trap often. And it kind of seeps into our relationship, does it not? Where we are like, I can only love so many people, or like, I'm going to love this one person because I can't love everybody. Right? Yeah, I can only love only one person. And I'm gonna dedicate all my love to that one person, or that, your nuclear family, your little home unit. And I'm just gonna put all my love into them, and then everybody else, I'm gonna like not display that kind of love to them, right? But love doesn't work like that, does it? If we really think about it, right? Some things just aren't like that. Like what the book was saying, time is like that, right? You only got a limited amount of time. There's no Back to the Future, right? We don't have time machines at this current moment. You only have so much. There are some things in the world that are limited, but love is not one of those things. Right? And that's what the authors are getting at here. So let's delve further into this idea and start like trying to examine, okay, how does love operate? What really is love, and like how is it infinite, or how is it abundant in that way? And what way can we tap into love? How does love operate and function? Well, I will read you some more quotes here. This is page 58. This section is called Clean Love. Can you imagine love without jealousy, without possessiveness? Key word there, possessiveness. Without that. Love washed clean of all its clinginess and desperation. Let's try. We can take some thoughts from Buddhism. Okay. What would it be like to love without attachment? Yep, Buddhism is all about that. Abandoning attachment, but also embracing love, okay? To open our hearts to someone with no expectations. Loving just for the joy of it, regardless of what we might get back. Imagine seeing the beauty and virtues of a beloved and letting go of how their strengths might meet our needs, or how their beauty might make us look better. So that's a way that we often don't look at love, right? Because, in this current society, the mainstream perception of love is like a sort of equivalent exchange, right? It's like an exchange rate situation going on. It's like, okay, I love you, but you have to love me in an equal way, right? Or basically, like, I'm giving you this, which is my love, is as a commodity. So I expect something in return. It's like some sort of commodity in return, right? But is that really what love truly is, or is that something else, right? I mean, that's the question we have to ask ourselves, right? Once you have that kind of idea of our expectation of love, then, is that really love at that point, right? And then can a relationship that's based on love truly last if it's kind of built like that, or it has that foundation? These are the questions, okay? But let me continue. I skipped 3 paragraphs down. Love doesn't much take to being stuffed into forms, which is what everybody's fantasies and imaginings are. Custom-built plans for a constructed individual they've created to solve all their problems. Love as a way to solve problems, right? A construct. Is love a construct? No. Is it a very specific way of solving a specific problems? No. What is love? Well, let's continue. I skipped down 2 lines. How many times have you rejected the possibility of love because it didn't look the way you expected it to? Perhaps some characteristic was missing you were sure you must have. Some other trait was present that you never dreamed of accepting. What happens when you throw away your expectations and open your eyes to the fabulous love that is shining right in front of you, holding out its hand? Clean love is love without expectations. So this is the love that this book is talking about. And, to be honest with you, I jive with that. Don't you? Maybe you don't. Comment below, right? Love without expectations. Of course, you don't want the person that maybe you express love to somebody and the person treats you like garbage, right? I mean, that's not something you want, right? But I mean, at that point, the person that's treating you like garbage is not loving you, right? But so that's not love, right? It's a one-way direction, which is not love, right? Love is a two-way street, right? But we got to think about love as a kind of mutual exchange, not so much an equivalent exchange, right? But a mutual exchange, right? Two people love each other in different ways, right? But bringing about that same benefit that love gives, that love provides. So why not, let's continue on this idea of the abundance of love and like abandoning this idea of love as this limited resource, right? And explore the other thing that we just talked about, right? So this is page 75. We begin on the top of the page. Many traditional attitudes about sexuality are based on the unspoken belief that there isn't enough of something, love, sex, friendship, commitment, to go around. If you believe this, if you think that there's a limited amount of what you want, it can seem very important to stake your claim to your share of it. You may believe that you have to take your share away from somebody else because if it's such a very good thing, someone else is probably competing with you for it. And isn't that kind of the world we live in today with the whole, unfortunately, like that's kind of how marriage works, right? You marry somebody, you stake your claim, like I love this person, I declare my love to everybody because I want everybody to make sure that this person is the person I love and they're off limits at that point, right? You can't love this person the way that I love this person, right? And it's kind of like, in a way, it's like a limited resources type of situation, like a marketplace style way of operating. Is that really the way we should love? Question. Let's see, because the camera's in reverse, so I have to always reverse right. Question, question mark. Anyway, or you may believe that if someone else gets something, that means there must be less of it for you, right? Like, oh, dang, everybody's getting married, man. I gotta hurry up before all the good people are taken away, and then there's not gonna be anybody left for me to get married, right? I mean, how many times, that we kind of think like this or have thought this way, or people we know think like this, not just marriage, dating, like, oh man, everybody's getting, swept up. I gotta hurry up and get my person. There won't be anybody left, right? Is this a good way of thinking about love? I don't know. Okay, so I'm turning the page to 76. This is the fourth line. People may think that if you love Bill, Bill, generic person named Bill, that means you must love Mary, generic Mary, less. Okay, so, people may think that if you love Bill, that means you must love Mary less. Or if you're committed to your relationship with your friend, you must be less committed to your relationship with your spouse. And then, how do you know if you're number one in a partner's heart? This kind of thinking is a trap. We know, for example, that having a second child doesn't usually mean that a parent loves the first child less, right? We know that. And that the person who owns 3 pets doesn't necessarily give any less care to any one of them than the person who owns 1. True. But when it comes to sex, love, and romance, it's hard for most people to believe that more for you doesn't mean less for me. And we often behave as if desperate starvation is just around the corner if we don't stockpile some love right now. Why do we change the way we perceive love when it comes to like what the author is saying? Sex, love, and romance, right? And, it's not the case with other things, but particularly with those 3, we just we flip the script, right? Why do we do that? And I would say like, well, it's kind of a social conditioning going on, like this kind of Puritan, patriarchal, even I would say maybe even Calvinist type of, colonial way of thinking, right? Steeps back to like a kind of, now it's more capitalist, but even before the Industrial Revolution, where corporations were king, this kind of like possession, this kind of having to own things to ensure survival, is kind of seeped into the romantic love sex realm. And it is we got I propose that we kind of escape that, because it's like it is kind of corrupting our idea of what love is, and it's preventing us from really experiencing true love. So let me read you some more quotes. This is page 80, top of the page. When you try to decide what limits you want to the openness of your relationship, it's not always easy to tell which are based on reality and which on fear of illusion. Okay? First, you have to pinpoint the areas in your life where you feel insecure, where you perceive the possibility of deprivation, a task that requires a lot of self-searching and honesty. It helps to ask, what am I afraid might happen? And so, we're talking about getting into the idea of, jealousy, really, which is, along these lines of love as possession, right? If you love somebody, and then you have this fear that somebody's going to take that loved one away, that loved one's going to love somebody more than you because, they're sharing their love, and you're like, uh-oh, there's only a limited amount of love, so I need to hold on to that. You can't just love just anybody, right? You can only love me, right? But where's that coming from? Like, where is that coming from? Is that just the natural order of things? No, right? It isn't. Because love doesn't work that way, It's coming from somewhere, right? And we're going to delve into that. And I put in my notes here, I wrote some notes. Question your belief or assumption. Where is your feeling truly based? So I skip one paragraph. You need to decide whether the thing you fear is actually possible. Okay, the feeling of loss of love. Like, is that what's really happening? Right? Am I really going to lose this person because they are expressing love for somebody else? Then you need to choose what you want to do about it. Frequent checking, good communication, to keep you aware of whether anyone's feeling deprived or overextended, and lots of internal reality checks. Communication. One thing that, is often not done with romantic, loving relationships, communicating with each other, right? And not just communicating with each other, although that's very important, communicating with yourself too, right? Communicate with yourself, and, also communication with society at large. I'm pushing this idea of like, well, what is society telling me? Is society dictating how I should love, or my idea of love? Is that what's going on? What are you telling me, society? And do I jive with that? Do I agree with that? Or have I just accepted that blindly? And maybe I need to think about it. Like, is this really how I should love? Or this is the correct interpretation of love? I don't know. So let's keep going with that train of thought, right? We're communicating not only with other people, but with ourselves, right? And we're focusing on the concept of love, right? So this is page 88, and this section is owning your feelings, first line of that section. Each person owns their own feelings. No one makes you feel jealous or insecure. The person who makes you feel that way is you. No matter what the other person is doing, what you feel in response is determined inside you. Even when somebody deliberately tries to hurt you, you make a choice about how you feel. You might feel angry or hurt or frightened or guilty. The choice, not usually conscious, happens inside of you. Reaching this understanding is not as easy as it sounds. When you feel rotten, it can be hard to accept the responsibility for how you feel. Wouldn't this be easier if it were someone else's fault? The problem is that when you blame someone else for how you feel, you disempower yourself. Ooh. If this is someone else's fault, only that person can fix it, right? So poor you can't do anything but sit there and moan. On the other hand, when you own your feelings, you have lots of choices. You can talk about how you feel. You can choose whether or not you want to act on those feelings. You can learn how to understand yourself better. You can confront yourself or ask for comfort. Owning your feelings is basic to understanding the boundaries of where you end and the next person begins. And the perfect step towards self-acceptance and self-love. Right? That's what I'm talking about. So you're communicating with the other person and you're understanding where you end and the other person begins, right? But you're also communicating with yourself towards self-acceptance and self-love, right? And this is what we're talking about. This is what I'm talking about when the book talks about owning your feelings, right? You gotta have that discussion with yourself. So when I'm talking about what is love, like you gotta ask that for yourself, and you can't really just look towards society and be like, when we think about like what love is, we fall to like what society has told us what love is, right? What we've been told by our surroundings, our family, our conditioning, our friends, right? But at a certain point, you do have to like, okay, independent of all that, what do I think love is? What does love mean to me? Right. And then that's when you start going through that emotional exploration, self exploration, and that's pretty important because it's honestly we have really corrupt and weird and messed up ideas of what love is in our mainstream society. So we gotta kind of detach ourselves from that for a moment and kind of explore that by ourselves. Then we'll get a better understanding of, okay, what do I really want from a loving relationship? And why do I want that? Why do I want it? What is it about me that makes me desire those things that I want? This is important. Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to go to page 138, and this section is titled "What is Jealousy?" Okay, so we're doing that self-exploration, and we're trying to understand, like, okay, why do I get jealous when it comes to like romantic love, sex relationships? What's going on? And we're looking in ourselves here. So this is that section. I start on the 4th line. Jealousy is not a single emotion. It can show up as grief or rage, hatred or self-loathing. Jealousy is an umbrella word that covers the wide range of emotions we might feel when our partners make sexual connections with somebody else. Jealousy may be an expression of insecurity, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, or feeling left out. Not good enough, inadequate, or awful. Your jealousy may be based in territoriality or in competitiveness or in some other emotion that's clamoring to be heard under the jealous racket in your brain. Sometimes it may show up as blind, screaming rage, and being blind makes it very difficult to see. Okay, so that's important to understand. Jealousy, this idea of love as possession, and then when love is shared or expressed in multiple ways with multiple people, right? And that love as possession gets challenged, like, oh, I don't possess it, and then you feel this emotion as jealousy, which is not one emotion, right? And it's not the same cause for everybody, right? Is a similar expression, but it's not even a similar expression. Sometimes people express jealousy in different ways, and the reason why it happens could be can depend on each individual person and their past experiences. That's the key point here. So jealousy is not the same thing as envy, but two different things. Jealousy could be many different things, and it can express itself in many different ways. And so that's why the self-reflection has to happen, right? You got to ask yourself, why am I feeling these things? And that's important. Whether you're into non-monogamy, polyamory, or you just like, hey, I'm cool with being a monogamous person, one person for me, please. Still, it's pretty important, either way it goes, to examine why do you have these feelings of jealousy sometimes when you have these inclinations of your loved one, your partner, your romantic partner perhaps, expressing love to somebody else. Where is that coming from? And it might not even be a romantic partner. It could be like your friends who are like having friends with others, and you're like, well, I feel kind of left out. And you have to ask yourself, well, why do you feel left out? Could be like family members where that happens. It's self-examination and that needs to happen. It'll help you out. So I will continue. I skipped 3 paragraphs. We're on page 139. Jealousy is often the mask worn by the most difficult inner conflict you have going on right now. A conflict that's crying out to be resolved and you don't even know it, because it's rooted so deeply it can be incredibly difficult to stay conscious when jealousy peeks over the horizon. We twist and turn and writhe in our attempts not to feel it. This is when your emotions are most likely to bring you to grief, when you believe that you need to avoid feeling them at any cost. One way not to feel a feeling is to project it onto your partner. Projection is a psychological defense that involves trying to move a painful feeling outside yourself by running your emotional movie on someone else, as if that person were a screen for your fears and fantasies. It may be that this is the only real definition of jealousy. It's the experience of projecting one's uncomfortable feelings onto one's partner. But here's some good news. If you recognize yourself in any of this, then some part of you has decided that you are strong enough to acknowledge the underlying emotion. And that means you're in an excellent position to do some healing right now. Use your jealousy as a signpost. Work on this feeling. I find it interesting because the authors are talking about how you can use the examination of jealousy, your self-reflection of why you feel jealous, to improve yourself, work your feelings out, which ultimately help your capacity to love, like grow your capacity to love, right? Increase your abundance of love, right? And so in that way, we are understanding what love is by this self-reflection, right? And that's really how we begin to understand, like, what is love, right? It does, a lot of that definition comes from self-reflection. And we kind of don't do that, right? Instead, we just rely on what everybody else tells us love should be. And so we get a lot of corrupt understandings of love. And so when we get into, romantic relationships and they don't work, it's often because it's based off of this definition of love that is not really love. Okay, so here we are on page 142. And we'll just continue this train of thought. This is the 3rd paragraph. The challenge comes in learning to establish within yourself a strong foundation of safety in your relationship that is not dependent on sexual exclusivity. This difficult work is part of the larger question of how to grasp your personal power and learn to understand and love yourself without another person to validate you. You become free to give and receive validation, not from need or obligation, but from love and caring. We suggest most strongly that you put some effort into learning to validate yourself. You're worth it. So, like I'm saying, it starts with you. Why do you love another person? Is it because you need to be validated? Or do you need something? Or is it because, I just want to give love? because I want to provide kindness. I want to be compassionate. You know, I want to be this way. It's not because there's some need that you give me, right? It's some it's a more so a kind of expression that I have to provide because it feels good, right? And that's now we're starting to get into like, what is love? Right? Is love based on obligation? Is love based off of validation? Or is it based on like true compassion, caring, kindness? Or this desire to do that, to be compassionate, to be kind, to provide caring, right? Now we're getting to what really love is. And if you're good with yourself, right? If you're, then you're able to be at that ability to provide that kind of love. I'll skip one paragraph here. Jealousy is not a cancer that you can cut out. It is part of you, a way that you express fear and hurt. What you can do is change the way you experience jealousy and learn to deal with it as you learn to deal with any emotion. Work with it until it becomes not overwhelming and not exactly pleasant, but tolerable. A warm summer shower rather than a typhoon. Like we were saying before about owning your feelings, owning your emotions, like kind of like, examining, okay, this is why I feel this way. You can't control how you feel, but you can control how you react to those feelings that you feel. So you take ownership, right? And it's the same thing with jealousy, right? You can't get rid of feelings and emotions like jealousy, but you can control how you respond and react to those emotions, right? And feelings. You can even use those as a guidepost, as the book says, signpost, as a way to navigate through those kinds of feelings in a self-help way, right? You're learning how to better love by working through your own issues. All right, so this is the last paragraph of page 143, the end of the second line. It is particularly important that you own your jealousy to yourself and to your intimates. If you try to pretend that you are not jealous when you are, others may believe you and see no need to support or protect you because you're fine, right? Or they may conclude that you are failing to take responsibility for your own emotions. When you deny your jealousy to yourself, you take from yourself the opportunity to be compassionate with yourself, to offer yourself support and comfort. Let us remember that feeling jealousy or any other emotion is not a crime. Only actions can be a crime. Feelings are feelings, and they're there whether you acknowledge them or not. But when you shove the feelings back into the pot, they may try devious routes to bring themselves to your attention, manifesting themselves so intensely: irrational anger, unreasonable behavior, crushing anxiety over anything at all, temper tantrums, crying fits, or even physical illness. Acting out means doing things you don't understand. Driven by emotions you have refused to be aware of in ways you may regret later. Yep, that's what we're talking about. Work through those emotions and acknowledge them, right? Acknowledge them. So what's going on is a lot of self-work that needs to happen. So for us to know what love is and to express love in a healthy way, we need to not so much look to other people to help us out, although you do seek comfort from other people, particularly your loved ones. But you can't leave out the work that you have to do on yourself, right? This is where it gets, in my opinion, philosophical, right? Because you gotta have to start doing some philosophical self-reflection, right? And that's what really drew me to, this type of way of thinking about love. It's like, oh, okay, we gotta take a more philosophical approach, and there's a lot of self-work involved, and that's a lot of what philosophy is about. Okay, I'm skipping 8 lines here. Jealousy is an emotion that arises inside you. No person, no behavior can make you jealous. Like it or not, the only person who can make that jealousy hurt less or go away is you. Okay, this is page 146. This is the 5th paragraph. Remember, as you look at yourself, to look kindly, and also remember that you are not balancing a checkbook. Anything you see that you don't like or that you want to change is not a debit that you subtract from your virtues. When you learn to reflect on your strengths, it becomes easier to look at your weaknesses, and acceptance and compassion. Keep your virtues at their full value and cherish them. Okay? Meaning you are who you are, right? And you have these weaknesses, and you just work on those weaknesses, but they're going to be there, and embrace them, improve upon them. Don't just be like, I suck, and that's just how I am, because that's not being kind to yourself. But also don't, wallow in self-loathing, right? Be like, hey, I have these weaknesses, and jealousy brings those weaknesses out. It's really, jealousy is that opportunity for you to be like, oh, okay, I see. I need to work on this. So I'm going to do that. But, I'm going to do that, and it's going to be good. That's a way to make myself better. It doesn't make me less than. It's not really a negative per se. It's just part of being human. It's part of the human experience. And let's go. Let's work on this. Right? Okay, so let me conclude on page 292 with the chapter that's called Conclusion. The section is from too many. Okay. The world is very fond of binaries. Black and white, male and female, mind, body, good and bad. These pairs we all learn are opposed. There's the right way and the wrong way. And our task is to do battle to defend the right and destroy the wrong. This kind of thinking dominates our courts, our politics, and our talk shows with some crazy results. For instance, some people believe that anyone who enjoys sex outside of marriage or a kind of marriage that's different from theirs must be attacking their marriage, right? Anything that is different must be opposed, must be the enemy. Ultimately that's what happens. It's like, oh, you're doing something different from me. You're attacking my well-being. Like I do it differently, and you're doing it a different way than me. So you're attacking me because you're doing it a different way, which no, right? But when we have this either or mentality, it's like, oh, you're doing it the or way and you're not doing it the either, then my either is being threatened, right? But no, right? We got to get out of that trap, right? The different is the enemy. No, right? But I'll continue. When right and wrong are your only options, you may believe that you can't love more than one person, or that you can't love in different ways, or that you have a finite capacity for love, that many must somehow be opposed to one, or that your only options are in love and out of love, with no allowance for different degrees or kinds of love. We would like to propose something different. Instead of fretting about what's right or what's wrong, try valuing whatever is in front of you without viewing anything as in opposition to any other thing. Right? Because we're all about that in our society. If you're doing it differently, then you're directly opposing how I'm doing it. It's like, how did we fall into this trap? Well, I get into that in all types of videos, but let's just focus on what's going on here. We think that if you can do this, you will discover that there are so many ways to be sexual as there are to be human, and all of them are valid. An abundance of ways to relate, to love, to express gender, to share sex, to form families, to be in the world, to be human, and none of them in any way reduces or invalidates any of the others. When we open our minds, philosophy, to a world beyond opposites, we become able to see beyond unrealistic perfection and unchangeable goals. We can free ourselves to be fully conscious of all the wonderful variety and diversity that there is right now in the world, right here, in the present, available to us. Thus, sluthood, the ethical slut, right, could become a path to transcendence, a freeing of the mind and spirit as well as the body, a way of being in the world that allows expanded awareness, spiritual growth, and love beyond imagining. Okay, now let me skip down to the last sentence of this page, 293. We believe that the freedom to love helps us see our lives as they really are, with honesty to perceive ourselves clearly and the fluidity to let us move onward as our needs alter. As a changing and growing self with changing and growing partners in a changing and growing world. You know, the only constant is change. I skip a paragraph. And in expanding our sexual lives, we foresee the development of an advanced sexuality where we can become both more natural and more human. Sex and intimacy really are physical expressions of a whole lot of stuff that otherwise has no physical existence. Love and joy, deep emotion, intense closeness, profound connection, spiritual awareness, incredibly good feelings, sometimes even transcendent ecstasy. In our utopia, intellect is not a trap that we get stuck in, but an honored tool we use to give form to our experience. We free our natural selves by opening our intellects to sensual awareness of our bodies. And when we are no longer stuck in our intellects, we can become free to welcome spirit, intuitive in experiencing the joy of life for the simple sake of experiencing, in communion with ourselves, with each other, and beyond. All right. So that's that. That's what I want to share with you with this book right here, The Ethical Slut. I think it's a great examination of the question, what is love? You know, how is love expressed? And what ways are we incorrectly expressing love? How are we misinterpreting love? How can we love better? Although this is a self-help book about polyamory, living in a polyamorous relationship or a non-monogamous relationship, I see it as much more than that. Even though that's pretty cool too, if you want to just take it for that. I'm not knocking that aspect of it, but it's even more than that, right? It's all those things all those questions that I brought up, right? Provides a lot of answers to those questions. So, just to that end, honestly, I read a lot of books, and I have to say, this is one of the best books I've ever read. It's an amazing book. Take that with a grain of salt. I'm only one person, but hey, I really liked it. So, check it out at your leisure. The Ethical Slut. It's by Janet Hardy and Dossie Easton. Okay, check it out. I think it's pretty cool, and it has some deep philosophy in it. Well, you've been watching The Black Ponderer. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.